Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Doors in Dialogue, a conversation about the history of Hispanic Heritage Month. I'm Teresa Temkin, the president of VAHLA, the Vanderbilt Association of Hispanic and Latinx Alumni. Our goal is to connect and support all members of the Vanderbilt Hispanic and Latinx community. If you're interested in getting involved, you can visit our website and sign up to be a community agent. We'll be dropping the link into the chat. I'd like to shortly turn it over to our moderator, Professor Gretchen Selke. But before I do, I'd like to just introduce her. Professor Gretchen Selke is the Assistant Director of the Center for Latin American, Caribbean, and Latinx Studies at Vanderbilt University. Her research interests include Latinx literature and culture, Afro-Hispanic literature, and Latinx entrepreneurship. Currently, she is completing a book-length manuscript on contemporary Latinx narratives. As a Library Dean's Fellow for the Manuel Zapata Olivier Special Collections Correspondence at the Jean and Alexander Hurd Library at Vandy, she helped create an online exhibit of representative correspondence and documents from 4 linear feet of Zapata Olivier's personal archives. Professor Selke is the Secretary and Treasurer of the Latinx Studies section of the Latin American Studies Association, LASA. In addition, she serves on the editorial board for the Afro-Hispanic Review. Gretchen, thank you so much for joining and moderating for us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Teresa. It's great to see you again. It's great to have everyone on the chat. Welcome, happy Friday, happy Latinx Heritage Month. I'm delighted to moderate our conversation today, and also thrilled to introduce my colleague, Celso Castillo. Celso Castillo is Associate Professor of History and is the Director of the newly minted Center for Latin American, Caribbean, and Latinx Studies, and Faculty Head of Memorial House. His research focuses on political, cultural, and intellectual histories of modern Latin America. He received his doctorate from UC Berkeley, where he began work on slavery and abolition in Brazil. And his other interests include the public sphere, literary culture, and Afro-diasporic thought. I'm thrilled to welcome my colleague, Professor Castillo, to this conversation and open the floor to him. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Gretchen. Thank you so much to VAHLA for this opportunity. And good morning, of course, to our panelists and people with us today. So I've been asked to say a few words about the history of Hispanic Heritage Month. And so kind of start there and then, pivot a little bit towards how we're participating in it at Vanderbilt, right? And so formally, I guess officially, there's 2 kind of well-known reference points. One, the earlier one, 1968, under Lyndon B. Johnson, where there was a week designated for Hispanic or cultural heritage. And then a couple decades later under Reagan, it was expanded out to a month-long recognition and celebration around mid-September to mid-October, as it marked and coincided also with independence celebrations in Mexico and in most countries in Central America, also several countries in South America. So that's one reference point, right? I mean, I think another reference point to always bear in mind is that behind both of those initiatives and long before both of those initiatives, what we're calling now Latinx communities in the United States had participated in a variety of different cultural projects to foster visibility, whether it's in Spanish Caribbean groups in New York City area, or in the West and Southwest, where predominant would have been Mexican-American groups as well. So I think that's just important to kind of, maintain that kind of context. And whereas on the one hand, it is newish, on the other hand, it is rooted in a centuries-long presence and participation in public life and in popular culture, right? So And as part of this new project, we're collaborating with Gretchen Selke, with Avery Dickens-Giron, with Colleen McCoy, with Alma Paz San Miguel, with this new center. It goes without saying that if and as our project is to connect the studies of Latinx cultures and societies and histories with also Latin American and Caribbean studies and cultures, that this is a foremost priority of ours. And we've been drawing on initiatives that have been set in motion for several years now, most specifically through the program in Latino and Latina studies. And this is where it's been a tremendous pleasure and benefit to have this continuity in working with Gretchen, who directed that program as of 2019. And those were the spaces that kind of fostered in collaboration with the Student Center and Social Justice and Identity that have fostered university-wide programming, right? I mean, I think one of the key initiatives that were set in motion, again, kind of going back to Gretchen and her time at the program of Latino Studies, was the Somos VU hashtag and initiative that is used to mark and to make visible a variety of different academic and cultural programs that happen on campus, and that happen also with an eye towards furthering links and bridges with the Latinx community at Vanderbilt. So as I've come to learn, Hispanic Heritage Month at Vanderbilt, this is, I guess, the third iteration of a more kind of formal program organized now through the Student Center of Social Justice and Identity. And this is where collaborations with Dr. Ashley Brown, with Antonella Valdivia have been essential and very important to expanding and enhancing and consolidating, really, right? I mean, we want to get to the point where it's not necessarily dependent on one person or another, but it becomes a part of the fabric at Vanderbilt, and hopefully what happens at Vanderbilt becomes part of the fabric within the Latinx community more generally in Nashville. So this is a little bit of where we're at and how we are trying to continue to extend and make resonant the activities over the course of the last month. And the last thing I will just say is that we had a tremendous honor to be able to organize a participatory art exhibit over the course of the last month called Hostile Terrain 95, where it centers on questions of immigration. It centers on actually the people that didn't make it across the Sonora and Arizona desert over the last several decades. And so, you know, it was in the high hundreds of students that participated in filling out up to 3,200 toll tags, forensic tags, and these were all hung and exhibited in Surratt art exhibit, art gallery, that is. And for the visit of the creator of this, we had close to 200 people participate and listen to the speech, to his talk. So Jason De Leon, anthropologist at UCLA. So anyway, so these are examples in which Hispanic Heritage Month continues to be visible and important at Vanderbilt, and in ways that we, as a center, are committed to that project.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Celso, Professor Castillo. I dropped in the chat a link to the Hostile Terrain 94 exhibit. Very powerful, worth a look for sure, if you're not familiar with that. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ruth Howard. Dr. Howard is a psychologist at the University Counseling Center at Vanderbilt. She received her PhD in counseling psychology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, completed her doctoral internship at the University of Illinois at Chicago's Counseling Center. In her clinical work, she collaborates to co-create a safe, warm, and connected healing environment with students that honors the strengths they exhibit on a day-to-day basis. Dr. Howard also has a passion for integrating an understanding of sociocultural systems of privilege and oppression in order to advocate for and support students with marginalized identities. As a psychologist who identifies as Latina, Dr. Howard's finds it both personally and professionally rewarding to support students in this way and works towards deconstructing deeply rooted systems of inequality. Dr. Howard, thanks so much for being here. Great to have you.
Thank you, Gretchen. I appreciate the introduction, and it's a privilege to be here with you all talking about this topic. So thank you for having me as a part of this dialogue. So I wanted to offer a psychological perspective to Hispanic Heritage Month and just share Hispanic Heritage Month programming and how important it is for several reasons. It not only provides opportunities for the Latinx community at Vanderbilt to celebrate our rich cultural heritage, to celebrate Latinx excellence and the contributions of Latinx changemakers, and to celebrate and honor the sacrifices and resilience of our ancestors. But it also allows us to engage in critical dialogue together about the work that we still need to do to connect and organize around dismantling anti-Black and anti-Indigenous oppression towards and within our own communities. And this is so critical, particularly at Vanderbilt, and given our current sociopolitical climate here in 2021, where Latinx folks are a large part of the essential workforce and have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19, where we're seeing our Haitian siblings being whipped and detained before reaching shore, where climate change is making us rethink our relationship with the earth. And according to the most recent census, Latinx community makes up about 18.5% of the population. And this number doesn't even include the undocumented members of our community. And despite being the largest minority group in the US, the legacy of intergenerational trauma caused by colonization and the ongoing systemic marginalization has resulted in our Indigenous history being erased, our Latinx history being erased, and Latinx folks being underrepresented in leadership, in positions of power, in history books and media. It's also resulted in Latinx community being perpetually othered and silenced in society, and has created a disconnect within cultural groups, within families, and within ourselves. We've become disconnected from our Indigenous roots and from the cultural traditions of our ancestors. And when there's a lack of representation in positions of power, in media, and in history, along with an accumulation of experiences of discrimination, marginalization, and race-based stress on the body, several things can happen. We can begin to internalize negative messages that we've received and begin to believe them about ourselves. For example, it can include thoughts like, I'm too different, I'm not good enough, I'm not valuable, and thoughts related to imposter syndrome or believing that you don't belong at a university like Vanderbilt and only got in due to your identity or due to a mistake. This contributes to a feeling of a lack of belongingness, a lack of acceptance, which is so important to us as humans. And this is consistent with some of the trends that we see at the UCC. One of the main reasons Latinx students seek out support at the UCC is often due to feeling isolated and disconnected from others and feeling an underlying lack of belonging. And this lack of belonging can often be amplified at predominantly white institutions like Vanderbilt. And since we're social beings, belongingness is a basic human need for our psychological and our physical well-being. It helps us feel a sense of security in the world, allows us to feel grounded and safe as we grow. And that's what we do in college, whether we're an undergraduate, graduate student, or a professional student, we're learning and we're growing. And belongingness also relates to being accepted and having the love and support of others, particularly during times of stress, during times of need, like during challenging times of the semester, midterms, finals. A sense of belongingness, acceptance, and support matters. It matters in college. So Hispanic Heritage Month programming that is meaningful and intentional and goes beyond Taco Tuesdays offers an opportunity to strengthen our sense of belonging, to build community, and to use our collective voices to push for change. And that increased visibility can decrease isolation. Students are able to find each other and begin to connect around common experiences, shared identities, and build pride in their Latinx, Afro-Latinx, and Caribbean identities, and cultivate a sense of community and belongingness that has been evidenced to decrease symptoms of anxiety, like worry about being accepted, and symptoms of depression like loneliness and hopelessness, which are so painful to feel. So to tie it all together, the opportunity to celebrate Latinidad during Hispanic Heritage Month, it honors the resilience of our ancestors whose shoulders we stand on, who thrived beyond colonization and have allowed us to be here. And celebration proudly proclaims that we have been here, that we are here, and that we will continue to be here, and that we've not only survived, but are thriving. And although 1 month certainly isn't enough, the opportunity to center Latinx voices, particularly the voices of the Black, Brown, and Indigenous members of our community, and others who hold intersecting identities that have been marginalized, like the voices of women, trans, non-binary, and disabled members of our community, lifting up those voices and stories on a platform like Hispanic Heritage Month at Vanderbilt allows Latinx students of all identities to decrease and let go of any internalized biases they may be holding, to feel an increased sense of belonging, to build community, and to listen, learn, grow, and work together to move towards liberation. And that's so incredibly important. So thank you for letting me share.
Thanks so much, Ruth. Dr. Howard, excuse me. Thank you so much for your thoughts, and thank you for being such a great resource for our community and our students at the UCC. I know I've heard from them that it means such a difference to have someone who looks like them there, right? And who they can really talk to. Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from a member of the class of 2025, Olivia Quiroga. Olivia is a first-year student at Vanderbilt and is a Cornelius Vanderbilt Scholar. As such, she aims to embody the values of leadership and contribution outside the classroom. At Vanderbilt, she is a member of the Association of Latin American Students, as well as partners in Health Engage, Neuroscience Majors Club, and volunteers around the world. She is majoring in neuroscience with a minor in gender and sexuality studies, and she's on the pre-med track. Outside of Vanderbilt, she loves volunteering, music, and science. Welcome, Olivia, and we're delighted you're here.
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and speak with all of you. I just want to say, Dr. Howard, I think that was beautiful, what you just said. And I'm meant to be talking about my connection with Hispanic Heritage Month first. And I think that a lot of what you said covers that. To me, it's a month where you can feel included. And I feel a lot of Hispanic pride, especially from this campus, which is amazing. But not only is it celebration, what's also important, again, a quote that I liked, it's not just about Taco Tuesdays, it's really about awareness as well. And I think that tends to get overlooked a lot of times by people. So to me, Hispanic Heritage Month, and what it is to me, I'm sure it is to a lot of other people, is just a connection with an identity that we experience on a daily basis, on a yearly basis, on a monthly basis. So what we experience in the month of celebration and awareness is what most of us are living on the regular. And I think that's important to emphasize because the celebrations and awareness go beyond just the month and just beyond the people who are celebrating. So I am from a Latin American family. I have ties to Cuba, and I like the representation a lot because I did a lot of volunteer work and service in my high school. And I'm excited to get involved here too at Vanderbilt with VAHLA and a lot of the things I'm volunteering with. I know there's Amigos too. So to me, I like to emphasize that volunteering with these kind of Latin American organizations is important at Vanderbilt too, because as a student who is privileged, I think that we have responsibility to go on and use that privilege to help other underprivileged people. So I did that in high school. I'm excited to do it in college. And Vanderbilt celebrates Hispanic Heritage Month in a lot of different ways. I was actually excited to see our calendar with all the events nearly every single day. So with ALAS, we have intersections with other clubs. I know an exciting event is Culture with MASA, which is the Mexican American Students Association. So there was a collaboration there. We also have Sabor Latino, which is a celebration of Latin American culture, which it was on Wednesday, and it was amazing. We had so many people come, which I love to see. We had amazing food, amazing music, amazing awareness too for important Latin American figures. We also have keynote speakers which we're having some come up. We're having some really exciting talks coming up that I'm really excited for. You can see the schedule on Vanderbilt's website, of course, but also the rest of Vanderbilt outside of ALAS. There's panels like this. We had an event called Beyond the Byline yesterday that I actually co-hosted with Peabody EDI, and we had just a chat about some important topics such as college enrollment after COVID, which is important, the term Latinx, which was very thought-provoking. We have a lot of good thought-provoking discussions. And we had the Hostile Terrain Gallery, which I know we talked about. There's support groups, networking. So overall at Vanderbilt, there's a lot of exciting opportunities to get involved with Hispanic Heritage Month. And it's nice to see this happening after a year of things being nearly entirely virtual. So I have a lot of faith with the turnout that these events are happening. So overall, I'd say, yes, Vanderbilt does a very, very good job mixing both the celebration and the awareness, because we have exciting events that are celebration, but also a lot of awareness raising activities that I think are good and that we can all connect to, because we all have connection with Hispanic Heritage Month, because it's something that we all live, and it's more than just a month to us. And I really appreciated everybody's take on it, because it really is something that raises pride and awareness and all these other important things that are so important to build affinity within Vanderbilt and get everybody included, not just Hispanic people at the campus. I think it's important to get everybody involved, and I think Vanderbilt does a very good job of doing that. So to tie it up, I think that everything is going amazingly with Hispanic Heritage Month. I could not be happier with my first year here celebrating it, and I think it's going very well.
Thanks so much, Olivia. I know that all of us love hearing from students and to get their perspective, especially alums. It's one of the things that we all hear is their favorite. So thank you. I have a list of some pre-submitted questions that those of you who registered submitted before today's conversation. I'm happy to start with those, but if you have additional questions, if you could please put them in the Q&A, that would be really helpful as we continue this conversation. Some of these questions that you submitted, I think have been well answered by our panelists. So I'm going to touch on those that maybe we haven't talked about yet. I hope that's okay. If you feel like the question that you submitted was not answered, or you'd like a little more detail, you can pop it again in the Q&A, and we're happy to talk more about that. Olivia, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to pick on you. One of the questions that was asked was about another event, kind of an ALA's signature event, Café Con Leche. I know you haven't probably seen it, but can you give an overview of what it is and when it happens?
So absolutely. So I am actually Café Con Leche co-chair this year. I'm on the exec board of ALAS, so very excited to speak about it. I'm totally okay with being picked on, but Café Con Leche is just about the biggest event that ALAS hosts. It's in the spring. I don't believe we have a date set up yet, but we're working with our director to establish everything. And it is this big celebration of Latinx culture, which is so exciting. It's basically a cultural showcase of dance. And we have all student performers, we have guest performers, and there's different kinds of dance. I think it depends on the year, but there's like Mexican ballet, and I think all these different cultures depending on who signs up. And we haven't started planning it yet. And this is, of course, my first year. I'm class of 2025, so I am a first year student. Haven't seen it yet, but excited to see where it goes. And I think it's a celebration of culture, which is always awesome. And I'm excited to see how all the student performers and guest performers dance, because everybody's invited, and it's one of those things that gets the entire campus involved. It's not just one section of campus, everybody is involved, and I think that that's very exciting, and I'm looking forward to planning it. But again, I wish I could speak more on my experience with it. I am a first year student, but I'm excited to get started planning and working with everybody to make it happen.
Thanks so much, Olivia. For those of you who remember Café Con Leche at Vanderbilt or have heard about it, the line wraps around Light Hall, and the whole Langford Auditorium is completely packed, which is, for those of us in the field, just like a magical night and so amazing. And we also get to see students and community members do things that we don't see, like as professors, them do in class, right? So it's so rewarding for us to see someone in a different light, because often, we see them as one thing. A student in our courses, and it's awesome to see, you know, people introducing dances and people doing the dances and people, you know, making the whole event, which is like, I think it's like 2,000 people, happen. So thanks for talking more about that. The next question is going to be for Celso, Professor Castillo. The question is, what can businesses do to be allies to the Latinx community and celebrate without cultural appropriation?
Thank you. You know, and thinking specifically here about Nashville, right, in a place that, I mean, for me personally, I've been here 13 years now. I grew up in LA. I grew up in California. So it does seem that a lot of aspects of Latinx culture are, you know, thoroughly known about and incorporated to some dimension of general kind of public life, you know, where I sort of came from. And so here, I think that despite always the potential for the appropriation and or, you know, something that's more on the marketing side of things, you know, even gimmicky, I do think it's absolutely important here. I mean, in surrounding context, how quickly the political winds can change, and all of a sudden there could be a pretty sort of swift and forceful backlash. I mean, it wasn't that long ago in the early 2010s where some states in the region, you know, started to follow what happened in Arizona. And so I do think that businesses can play an outsized role in Nashville and ideally across the region, but certainly in Nashville, in at least making that initial commitment or taking that step towards creating a space of, as you know, Olivia has been saying, of awareness, of visibility, right? And participating with other community organizations and entities that are also, you know, with shared goals and visions. And so that's also another element, right? To sponsor and to get behind financially other kind of community building initiatives. Yeah, I you know, it would sound almost idealistic, but you would also hope that in any kind of context where there is political backlash and whatnot, that it's important for the businesses to position themselves and to also participate in discussions that are about safeguarding well-being and basic rights for people, for workers, and in this case, the Latin community that is, you know, so essential in every facet of the local economy and life, right? So I think that these are different ways in which businesses can and hopefully will continue to be a part of Hispanic Heritage Month and you know, and make it part of their own mission as well.
Thanks so much. Another question for you, Professor Castillo, maybe, or anyone, honestly, if you want to jump in. The question is submitted to the Q&A, and it is, can you please share why the dates of Hispanic Heritage Month span September and October and not just 1 month? I'm picking on you, Professor Castillo, as a historian. And I know you, so will you let us know why the dates are what they are?
Yes, as they were, as this period that does span these 2 months was kind of consolidated as such, the idea, it's bookended in broad terms around, on the front side, these series of independence commemorations. On the backside, and I fell short of highlighting this earlier. On the backside, we have, you know, Dia de la Raza, we have indigenous remembrance as well, that are important to capture in the context of these conversations. And so again, as it has been officially consolidated, that is my understanding of the why it spans into these 2 months, and it's not contained to the one specifically. But I'd be happy to hear from others as well, or yourself, Professor Selke. Like,
I think that you nailed it. It starts with the date of I think it's 6 countries, right? Nicaragua, El Salvador, others. 2 days later, it's Mexico, right? And then it doesn't exactly end with Dia de la Raza because that date kind of fluctuates with the calendar. And I think that the ending is a little more arbitrary than the start to make it, 15 to 15 is my understanding. When the Lyndon Johnson administration started what was known as Hispanic Culture Awareness Week, I think, in 1968. It was just a week-long proclamation, and expanded under Reagan. It became more like the other acknowledgements of heritage contributions. So I think that's why. Our next question was a pre-submitted question. This one is for Dr. Howard. Dr. Howard, how does Hispanic Heritage Month help students build a sense of community? Can you elaborate a little bit more about that idea of building community?
Yeah, absolutely. And so community is so important for mental health. Again, feeling grounded in a sense of belonging, in a sense of acceptance. And so, like was said by Olivia and Dr. Castillo, it really does bring visibility to the community, and it allows students to come together because in many ways, many of the experiences on campus can be disconnecting. Students can feel like they're the only Latinx individual in their class or in their lab or in their program. And so that visibility matters, and having opportunities to connect and celebrate, again, it disrupts that narrative of, again, the experiences of marginalization and discrimination in a way where it's positive. And it also shows that they matter. And, again, that felt sense of belonging is a part of this too. And, knowing that their intersecting identities are things that matter at Vanderbilt, and that they're an important part of the Vanderbilt community. And I think that in that way, it adds for a felt sense of community, but then also literally an opportunity to connect, join voices, and to cultivate change. Our students are incredible, and the Vanderbilt students are really unstoppable when they're connected. And so there's nothing better than an opportunity like this to get students who care, who are passionate, and who want to create change, to have them to come together in these ways. And so I think there's a few different layers to that. But in general, I love the question because community is so important. And I think Vanderbilt does that really well. And it's a space where we can continue to grow. My hope is that each year, with celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, that it becomes increasingly inclusive and additional dialogues on what we need to do.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Olivia, a question for you. How does ALICE's work, or how does ALICE work to represent all Latinx students at Vanderbilt?
Yeah, so I think that an important part of ALAS is that it's open to not only Latin American students, but also just the general body meetings are for everybody, to get everybody involved with the culture. And it represents all Hispanic and Latin American students because anybody can join, anyone can apply to be on the exec board and join the events and the general body meetings. And it's advertised pretty well through our newsletter. And I really like that a lot of people come. We had our first general body meeting a couple weeks ago, and a lot of people came who were just coming with their friends that were Latin American, or just coming for even just the free food. It's taking a part in the culture. And I think that sending out the newsletters and posting on social media, it keeps everybody, including the Latin American students and non-Latin American students, up to date about what's going on in culture and society and current events. And I think that all the aspects that ALAS does, both celebration and awareness, I think they really culminate in keeping everybody up to date and keeping everybody involved. And even if people are coming for the free food, hey, it's part of our culture, so why not share it? And they get to watch a slideshow about something that's going on in current events at the same time. So all around, I think everybody gets included because of the general body meetings, and the events like Sabor and Café Con Leche are very inclusive to everybody and very inclusive of all cultures.
Thanks, Olivia. We have another question from the Q&A. This question is, what can we do to elevate Hispanic Heritage Month in our day-to-day lives throughout the month? Black History Month, for example, seems to be much more known with the help of Black athletes. What can we do to spread the word and raise awareness? Ideas, thoughts? What can we do to elevate Hispanic Heritage Month? You can jump in, I can call on you, put you on the spot.
I love this question, and I love the challenge that it brings. I think a few ideas that I have, and certainly, not the only ones, but not only is to be intentional about attending programming, and as you attend, right, being willing to approach people. In terms of, psychological literature, we know that we tend to approach people who look like us. And so embracing anti-racism and openness as you kind of connect is really important. Also thinking about diversifying your social media feed. So looking for, those folks who maybe are Latinx activists and kind of building up their platform in some ways or sharing their information. Thinking about, there's disability activists like Sins Invalid, and they're a group of people of color who really uplift disability justice. And so really kind of exploring different areas on your social media feed can be one as well. I'm not sure about my colleagues, but also feeling like, getting to know history and having opportunities to attend things like that really honor Indigenous history, getting to explore that feels really important. Any other ideas?
Thank you, Dr. Howard. I'm happy to also chime in on here and to echo, of course, this idea of participation, right? And as we are doing this program with Vanderbilt alums, I think that to the extent that, at least in the Vanderbilt context, that one of the connections now maybe, and maybe it was the case before, but that may be kind of communicated back to the university is this emphasis, right? That is these partnerships that are happening across campus, drawing on student initiatives to entrench it, to make it a more permanent structural part of the fabric here. I mean, I think that's really our goal. I mean, we're mindful, we're excited about the opportunities that arise when all eyes are looking in September, October, but we're also motivated, and we're here because in the center in particular, right, as a research center, we are here to ground, to extend out curriculum in a way that that does put these questions and issues and cultures at the center of a variety of disciplinary contexts, and in partnerships across the university as well. Just yesterday, Professor Selke and I, we attended the Latinx seminarians of the Divinity School. They held a lovely, wonderful reception and gathering. We have also, as Olivia was mentioning earlier, there's partnerships between VAHLA and MASA, which again is amazing to kind of hear from the perspective of having been here a little bit longer, that in a small way, what seems normal to somebody that's coming in now about spaces, about inclusion, I think a lot of us that have been here longer, wouldn't have taken that for granted, right? And so there's a lot of kind of building blocks that went into making this happen. And just kind of the last thing, as was also mentioned along the lines of social media, that there are increasing efforts in the media to capture, to connect to, and especially I think where we live, to connect these dots, to strengthen, to reinforce people's work. And in Tennessee, for example, the center had collaborative opportunities with David Plazas of the USA Today, the Tennessean, and so he has a Latino Tennessee newsletter. So that's another option to kind of subscribe to and to learn about a variety of experiences and projects happening around the city, around the state, that amplify, right, that make this less kind of seem like a pop-up of a here and there, but of a larger kind of presence and commitment that is ongoing. So.
Thanks so much. I think that's helpful. I'm going to drop in the chat a link to the Tennessee column that Professor Castillo just referenced. David Plazas is really interesting and insightful, and his sort of breadth as a reporter, both in Spanish and English, is impressive. He also just interviewed Professor Castillo, and you can see his piece on him, as well as some other really great coverage, which I think is needed. To follow up, we have another submitted question, and the question is, how is Hispanic Heritage Month celebrated around the country in different ways? Maybe these are your own experiences with what you've noticed, or maybe regional differences in celebrations and what they look like. Happy to jump into if I'm putting you on the spot. So also, I know you're from LA, so can you talk a little bit about what it looked like in LA?
Yeah, I mean, and here it's more, just personal insights. I'm Brazilian, Brazilian Peruvian. My mother's Peruvian. I was raised in LA from the age of 5 in a neighborhood that is virtually 100% Mexican, Central American. Bilingual city, predominantly Spanish city, actually, or neighborhood. But anyway, so the idea of a kind of broader Hispanic Heritage Month, in a space like that, is still is by no means a given, right? I mean, insofar as people's identities are going to vary and evolve, and these are always relational. And I think that in a larger context of Southern California, and I guess even California in general, there is a presence, an awareness, right? And not that it means that it necessarily is more open or inclusive, by far. I mean, far from it. But nonetheless, that there is that that history there, that culture there, that isn't unfamiliar. So I think that, again, to me, being here now, it has a particular importance and register and centrality, and just kind of kickstarting a whole host of other, projects and initiatives that are really important. But I, not having been where I grew up for at least 15 years now, 20 years, including graduate school, I've kind of lost sight of it a little bit. I mean, in a place that is once more, very strongly marked by Mexican history and culture, something like Cinco de Mayo would have been somewhat more visible, right? Which is interesting in and of itself, because one facet of this Hispanic Heritage Month in a university campus, at least, is that it is more kind of intellectual, cultural, serious, so to speak, as opposed to like a Cinco de Mayo special at restaurants and other types of establishments, right? So anyway, that's just a little bit of my own experiences, but I'd be happy to hear others.
Dr. Howard, can you talk a little bit about what Hispanic heritage looked like in the Midwest?
Sure, yeah. So I was in the Wisconsin area and the Chicago area, and it really was a beautiful, expression of togetherness. So there was typically a lot of celebration going on. And just thinking about my own personal experiences too, growing up, that mattered, like seeing how much it was celebrated, how people did turn out, how it was food and dancing mattered, especially in the Midwest when I was living there. I am from Venezuela. I was born there and grew up in the States. I grew up in Florida, attending predominantly white schools, and just growing up, not really having much of an experience with Hispanic Heritage Month, it was really meaningful to kind of have grown into graduate school and to see that becoming more and more visible, becoming more and more celebrated. And so it was really meaningful to attend and to have all of those events going on that I could participate in, especially as I kind of thought about my own identity and my own desire to reconnect with that and what that means for me. So just personally, I think that it was really meaningful. It was always just beautiful, fun, a lot of events, both in Wisconsin and in Chicago, where I did my internship, and that meant a lot. I can't recall like kind of specifics exactly, but again, just personally for me, it was a meaningful opportunity to connect with my identity and with the community.
Thanks so much. I would love to hear some thoughts also from you, Teresa, about sort of the alumni side of things and what you're noticing as an alum, obviously as president of VAHLA. If you could share a little bit with what you see, that would be great.
Absolutely. So just to begin, and we'll go ahead and send this out as well. So Vanderbilt is standing up all of our affinity groups, which is where VAHLA is one of them. And we kind of all started talking about it on the alumni side back in 2019. And it took a little bit with the pandemic to get the ball rolling. We had our first in-person meeting actually in February of 2020, and then weirdly something happened. I don't know. But, that being said, we have continued. And so there is that. But the point of these affinity groups is to create that sense of community within the community. Vanderbilt, to I think most of our points, a lot of us have experienced, Vanderbilt is a school that for a very long time drew from a certain segment of the country, from a very particular population, so it does not have a longer standing history of diversity and inclusion, but I'm very proud to say that I've continued to see us grow and recruit the next generation of a diverse America, a diverse world. And one of the ways that we encourage our members to give back is to become that community agent and reach out. And to the person who is asking, how do I do this throughout the year? For a lot of us, the joke I make at work is I'm Hispanic all year long. I'm going to be Hispanic on October 16th. It doesn't only happen for 1 month of the year. So if there's a thing that is affecting our folks all year long, that's a thing that we need to continue to pursue. And so to that end, that's what a group like VAHLA is for. And as the professor mentioned, the existence of a Mexican Student Association, that was not a thing when I was at Vanderbilt. And I'm so excited to know that that existed. There was a Caribbean Student Association, and we would work with them as the Vanderbilt Association of Hispanic Students. But country specific, frankly, there wasn't the population for it. So the idea of there being that many students that we can sustain separate groups is exciting. And I think from the Vanderbilt side of like an alumni looking back in, we can say, oh, look at this. But equally, Ruth, I'm from Florida, but I grew up in Miami. So for me, it was surrounding me, right? Hispanic culture was, all around. I'm a Cuban American from South Florida, very much surrounded by my community. But if I was something else at the time, I wouldn't have seen myself represented there. When I left Florida, that was to some extent where I felt more Hispanic, in that suddenly I was othered. I was like everyone else when I lived in Miami, and I was not like everybody else the moment I left Miami. So to some extent, it became more meaningful to me to be Hispanic outside of Miami, where suddenly it became part of my being once I stepped outside of the world where everyone was like me. But as an alumni, we continue to sit there and say, like, look at this beautiful mosaic of our Vanderbilt students, of our Vanderbilt alumni, and we're bringing them all together under this roof of VAHLA to sit there and say, like, let's become a group that our folks can reach back to and create that community across this country and across our international alumni as well, so that they can participate and have, you know, that community continue, that Vanderbilt community, but that, you know, subsection where we oftentimes did feel more welcome. So I hope that that helps. And I hope that you all continue to do that. And we'll drop the links so that if you want to help recruit the next generation of Vanderbilt folks, you can join CORE with our alumni, with our admissions office. And you can also become a community agent for VAHLA as well.
Thanks so much. I think that idea of feeling an identity once you leave a place where your identity is affirmed is an experience that is universal and not just about Latinx people. And I think that was a great point to make. I think we have time for one final question. And really, this is open to any panelist. Given the increase in demographics of Latinx populations, how do you see Hispanic Heritage Month gaining momentum and or changing? Will it change? How do you see this evolving, sort of in general terms?
I mean, I'm happy to say a few words. Yes, and the numbers are perceptibly, you know, higher in Nashville now than, you know, a decade ago, and certainly 2 decades ago. I think that it's been more the case, and this is just anecdotally, the last 5 to 10 years, that it isn't exclusively an international population that's coming in. That you are also, you know, as with the rest of the influx to Nashville and the Middle Tennessee region, it's Texas and California and Chicago and Florida, and so it's a vibrant mix of people, as well as in the immigrant population, and so I think it. You know, as Teresa was saying, that, like, you know, we are in a context now where it matters more that we have these opportunities to create spaces and to raise questions, to challenge, and look inward as well. I think as Professor Howard said earlier, I mean, these conversations have to be as critical within as they are, you know, more generally. And so I, you know, at some point, maybe we get to a context where it seems to be more, or that the population awareness and numbers are such, and relative positioning in society are such that it reflects other parts of the U.S. and it's more kind of blended in. But I think in the near term, it's absolutely critical that we kind of continue to engage and build off of, you know, existing and ongoing efforts.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of those who joined us virtually. These are important conversations, and we're so glad to have you participate in them. I second Teresa's exhortation that you get connected and get involved. She posted some links in the chat about how to do that. We know that you know about the group because you're on this chat today, but we would love to hear more from you. And if you have other suggestions, we're always open to ideas and ways to connect. Thank you so much and have a wonderful weekend. And we hope you do something to enjoy Hispanic Heritage Month. Thanks so much.